Why was the nurse the only one who didn't flinch? The Blackhawk's rotor wash rattled the hospital windows, the sound shaking loose a thin rain of dust from ceiling tiles. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the sterile white glow turning everything harsh, too sharp, too alive. Inside Trauma Bay 3, a team in masks and gloves braced for impact. A wounded Navy SEAL was seconds away from arrival. The radios had been clear. Multiple shrapnel injuries, massive blood loss, unstable vitals. Dr. Jonathan Sterling stood at the center of the bay like a general awaiting his troops. 52, silver hair combed immaculately back, white coat pressed to perfection. He had spent 3 decades building his reputation as a trauma surgeon who never hesitated, never lost control. He demanded obedience. He expected silence when he spoke. And yet as he barked orders, blood warmer ready, IV lines in place, trauma panel on standby, his eyes brushed past the quiet woman standing near the supply cart. Plain scrubs, dark hair pinned back in a no-nonsense bun. No one paid her more than a glance. She was just a nurse. But when the double doors burst open and the gurney flew in, chaos at its heels, she was the only one who inhaled, slow and steady, like she'd been here before. 2 paramedics rushed beside the patient, flight suits stained crimson, faces set in grim lines. The man strapped to the board was young, late 20s, his body carved into by jagged wounds. Shrapnel peppered his chest and abdomen, blood-soaking field dressings that were already failing. His skin was the color of ash. His lips quivered with breaths that barely reached his lungs. BP 70 over 40 and dropping, one paramedic shouted. 2 units in the air, he's still bleeding out. Sterling swooped in, his hands practiced, peeling back soaked gauze, barking for more blood, more suction, more everything. Dr. Patel, the resident at his side, scrambled to follow each command. Monitors screamed warnings no one needed to hear. The patient was dying. But the nurse, Maya Russo, didn't freeze. She didn't falter. Her eyes scanned the wounds, tracing their origin, their patterns, their depth. A training explosive. A liver tear, she thought instantly. The bleeding wasn't random, it was a pulsing rhythm. She had seen this before, felt it with her hands, smelled it in the sand half a world away. He's got a liver laceration, Maya said, her voice calm but certain. That's your bleeder. Sterling barely looked at her. I can see that, Nurse Russo. Focus on your job. But she didn't step back. Not yet. Her instincts were awake now, rising through the walls she'd built over the last 3 years. She saw the artery, invisible to everyone else. She knew it by memory, by scars, by muscle and bone. If you don't clamp the hepatic artery, he won't make it to the OR, she said. Sterling snapped, his pride sharp. I said stay in your lane, prep for laparotomy. The gurney's wheels squeaked as they began to push toward the surgical doors, and then the patient convulsed. The monitors shrieked in unison, flatline danger, oxygen crashing. His lips turned blue, his chest heaved against restraints, and then silence. Crashing, Patel cried, fear splitting her voice. Sterling froze just a second, half a heartbeat, but it was too long. His hands hovered, useless, mind locked in calculation. Maya stepped forward, her tone cut like a blade. Clamp it now or he's gone in 60 seconds. Nurse Russo stepped back. Clamp it now. Her voice wasn't a nurse's voice. It wasn't civilian. It was command. A tone sharpened in desert heat under fire with lives hanging in the balance, and something in it forced the room to still. Sterling hesitated, anger flushing his face, but his hands trembled. He didn't move. Maya didn't wait. She seized the clamp, plunged her hand into blood and torn flesh, and found the artery by feel alone. Muscle memory guided her fingers. She pressed, precise, calculated. The hemorrhage slowed, then stopped. The monitors held their frantic wail a few seconds longer before settling into fragile stability. Blood pressure crawled upward. Oxygen ticked higher. A pulse returned. The trauma bay fell into silence. Everyone stared at her. Get him to the OR, she said, voice steady. You've got 20 minutes to repair the vessel. No one argued, not even Sterling. They pushed the gurney down the hall, wheels squeaking like a funeral march. Maya kept pace, her hands still clamped inside the wound. At the surgical doors, the patient stirred, his eyes fluttering open through pain and sedation. His gaze found her first, a flicker of recognition, a whisper cracked and hoarse. Phantom. Her hand stilled. "Save your strength," she murmured. But then his eyes shifted, locking onto Sterling, the surgeon still pale with disbelief. And through lips torn with pain, the soldier rasped words that broke the room apart. "You have no idea who she is." Then his eyes closed. They wheeled him into the bright light, and the doors slammed shut. In the corridor, Maya pulled off her gloves. Blood dripped down her wrist, staining her scrubs. She exhaled once, controlled, quiet, but inside she knew the walls were cracking. You couldn't hide forever. Not when ghosts bled their way back into your life on gurneys and whispered your name. She straightened, left the hallway, and walked back into the fluorescent quiet of the trauma bay. Around her, nurses whispered. Questions buzzed. Who was she? How did she know? Why had she acted when the chief surgeon froze? But she ignored them all. A soldier was alive tonight who shouldn't be. That was what mattered. For now. Because tomorrow, she knew, the questions would come. And once they started, there would be no turning back. Why did his eyes open at all? The sedative should have kept him under, locked away in the dark silence of anesthesia. Yet Sergeant Ethan Walsh had fought his way back, if only for seconds, long enough to whisper a single name that shouldn't have existed in that room. Phantom. Now in the recovery ward, machines beeped their steady rhythms. Shadows stretched long beneath the dimmed lights. The storm of the night had passed, but in its wake was the uneasy quiet, the kind that doesn't bring peace, only more questions. Maya Russo stood at the foot of his bed, her chart balanced in one hand, pen motionless. He shouldn't have recognized her. Too much blood lost, too much pain, too much time since Kandahar. Yet when his eyes opened again, hazy but clear enough, recognition lingered. "You should be asleep," she said softly, adjusting his IV drip. Ethan's head turned against the pillow. His face was pale, drawn taut by exhaustion, but his gaze stayed locked on hers. His voice rasped like gravel dragged over concrete. "Tried, kept seeing sand, thought I was back there." Her hand stilled on the IV line. Sand, Kandahar, he wasn't hallucinating, he remembered. "You're in Montana now," she said carefully. "Whitefish Regional, you're safe." Safe? His lips twisted into something halfway between a grimace and a smile. "Then why do I feel like I'm seeing a ghost?" His voice cracked, but his words cut. "You're Lieutenant Russo, Phantom. We thought you were dead." The air tightened around her chest. "Keep your voice down," she whispered, glancing toward the hallway. "No one here knows that name." But Ethan's eyes glimmered with stubborn clarity. "It's you. I'd stake my life on it. I already did twice." Memories flickered between them without words, dusty roads littered with shell casings, the shriek of mortar fire, the brutal pressure of her hands clamped over wounds that should have been fatal. He wasn't guessing. He remembered. Maya pulled a chair beside the bed, her voice low. "You don't understand. That person doesn't exist anymore." Ethan coughed, winced, then forced the words through pain. "She exists when men are bleeding out, when everyone else freezes and you move. I saw it tonight." Maya's hands folded in her lap, clean now, but she could still feel the slick warmth of his blood, the artery between her fingers. The weight of choices made in seconds. The responsibility of saving a life you couldn't afford to lose. "I'm a nurse," she said at last, her tone flat, final. "That's all anyone here needs to know." But Ethan shook his head weakly. "No, that's all you want them to know." The door swung open. Light spilled into the ward, followed by the cheerful voice of Sophie Anderson, one of the younger nurses. Her eyes lit when she saw Maya. "There you are," Sophie said brightly, pushing a medication cart. I was just checking vitals. How's he doing? Stable, Maya replied smoothly, rising to her feet, professional mask back in place. Pain under control. Sophie nodded, though her attention lingered on Maya longer than it should have. She had seen what happened in the trauma bay, had witnessed the moment when the quiet nurse turned into something else entirely. That was incredible what you did earlier, Sophie said, all flickering in her tone. I've never seen anyone move like that. Dr. Sterling froze and you just. Experience, Maya cut in quickly, that's all. Sophie tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. Where did you train? We didn't learn those kinds of protocols in nursing school. Different hospitals, different stories, different lies. Maya had practiced this part for years. Seattle, trauma rotations, you pick up things. But Sophie's curiosity didn't fade. And she gestured to Ethan. He said something when you were taking him to surgery, called you. Drugs, Ethan interrupted sharply, his voice stronger now. I was out of my head, don't read into it. Sophie's eyes flicked between them, suspicion forming at the edges of her innocence. She finished her notes but gave Maya a look that promised questions would return. Then she left, the cart squeaking down the hall. The silence she left behind was heavy. You shouldn't have covered for me, Maya said, her voice low. Ethan smiled faintly. You're welcome. She exhaled, steady but tired. You don't understand what's at stake. Then make me understand. His tone was quiet but resolute. Why did you disappear? Why bury your name? We thought you were gone, Maya. The weight of his words settled like ash. For years she'd lived in the shadows of small towns, working shifts, walking home above the hardware store, pretending normalcy was enough. For years she'd avoided questions. But Ethan Walsh had cracked open the coffin she'd nailed shut. She pulled his blanket up, a gesture equal parts medical and maternal. Rest, that's an order. But even as she said it, she knew sleep wouldn't come easily, for either of them. Dawn came cold. Frost clung to the Montana mountains, their peaks glinting gold under the first light. Maya walked the quiet halls of the hospital, her fresh scrubs a poor disguise against the stares that followed her. Word was spreading. At the nurse's station, Sophie leaned close to a colleague, voices dropping when Maya passed. Dr. Patel's curious glances lingered a beat too long. Even Sterling, crisp as always, watched her with eyes that no longer dismissed but demanded answers. Her anonymity was unraveling. And then the emergency speakers crackled. Code trauma. Multiple casualties inbound from Highway 93. ETA 3 minutes. The hospital surged into motion. Maya moved instinctively, prepping bays, her mind flicking into that mode she hadn't wanted to use again. Combat readiness, 3 steps ahead. Trauma wasn't chaos. It was pattern, it was probability, it was war without uniforms. Paramedics crashed through the doors. A logging truck had collided with a van. Patients poured in on gurneys. Broken bones, internal bleeding, shock. But when Maya saw the third stretcher, her heart stilled. The face was older now, marked by exhaustion and pain, but she knew it instantly. Corporal Carlos Mendoza, one of hers, trained under her hand at Fort Bragg. His eyes widened when they met hers. Recognition flared, then something sharper, warning. Maya, he whispered through gritted teeth. Her pulse spiked. Don't, she hissed under the noise of the trauma bay. But his words slipped out anyway. They're looking for you. Her hands worked automatically, assessing his injuries, abdominal tenderness, possible splenic rupture, but her mind raced. Carlos here was no accident. Neither were the black SUVs she'd glimpsed outside, government plates glinting beneath the Montana sun. They know, he said, lips barely moving. About Kandahar, about what you saw, they're reopening it. Maya froze for half a second before training snapped her back. She called out vitals, directed scans, masked her face with clinical calm. But inside, panic clawed. The past wasn't just knocking, it was inside the hospital. And it wanted her name. In the CT scan room, the hum of machinery filled the silence. Carlos winced under the scanner, but his grip found her wrist, strong despite blood loss. "Don't let them bury it again," he rasped. "Don't let them silence you. You're the only one left who saw." Maya stared at the monitor, at the bleeding organ glowing on the screen. A medical problem, a clinical answer. But outside these walls, the world wasn't clinical. It was political. It was survival. If she spoke, she'd be dragged back into tribunal rooms, into interrogations, into nightmares painted as lies. If she stayed silent, she'd be complicit. The machine beeped. Images froze, splenic rupture confirmed, manageable if they moved fast. She removed his hand gently, her voice calm. "Focus on breathing. I'll handle the rest." But as she turned, she caught sight of two men in dark suits through the window, federal agents, watching, waiting. And she knew then, hiding was over. The ghosts had found her. Why did the surgeon block their way? The corridor outside Recovery Ward C buzzed with fluorescent light, but the moment Dr. Jonathan Sterling planted himself between the federal agents and Maya Russo, the air shifted. His white coat looked like armor. His voice cut like a scalpel. "This is a hospital," Sterling said, calm, measured, but with steel beneath. "Not an interrogation room. If you want to question my staff, you'll do it through proper channels." The taller agent, gray at the temples, credentials clipped to his jacket, didn't flinch. He introduced himself as Special Agent Lawson, Department of Defense Criminal Investigations. His younger partner hovered behind, bulkier, eyes sweeping the ward like a predator mapping territory. "Doctor," Lawson said evenly, "this nurse is a potential witness in an ongoing investigation. Her cooperation is not optional." Maya stood very still, the fluorescent light washing her face pale. She didn't speak, didn't move. Years of hiding pressed against her ribs, whispering to vanish, to run, to blend into shadows. But her training pinned her to the floor. Don't show weakness. Don't give them more than you must. Sterling's jaw tightened. "Then get a warrant. Until then, my staff answers to me." The younger agent stepped forward, his tone a shade harder. "We can make that happen within the hour." "Do it," Sterling snapped, surprising even himself. "And I'll have hospital legal counsel meet you with court filings citing patient safety. 2 of the people in this ward just came out of surgery. You bring chaos in here, you compromise their recovery. I won't allow it." It wasn't kindness. Not exactly. Pride, stubbornness, maybe a dash of respect he couldn't admit yet. But for the first time, Maya saw him as something more than the rigid surgeon who froze when it mattered most. Tonight, he was drawing a line, not for her, but because no one told Jonathan Sterling how to run his hospital. The silence cracked when Corporal Carlos Mendoza spoke from his bed, voice rough but carrying. "Agents, if you want statements, start with me." Both men turned. Lawson studied Carlos, recognition flashing. "Corporal Mendoza, we've been trying to locate you." "Not hiding," Carlos muttered, his skin pale with pain. "Just off the radar. You want testimony, I'll give it, about Kandahar, about what we saw." Ethan Walsh pushed himself higher against his pillows, wincing, color drained. "And me, Sergeant Ethan Walsh, SEAL Team 7, I'll testify too." His voice carried authority, even weakened. "About her, about what she did, about what happened." The agents exchanged a glance, momentary calculation, quick as lightning. Lawson refocused on Maya. "Lieutenant Russo," he said quietly, "you don't have to decide right now, but you know why we're here. The past doesn't stay buried forever." That name again. Lieutenant. Words she had tried to erase, scraped from her records, buried beneath civilian routines and night shifts. But here it was, resurrected by men in suits and ghosts in hospital beds. She forced herself to breathe. "I'm a nurse," she said evenly. "That's my job now." Lawson's eyes didn't blink. "You're more than that, and you know it." The agents left, footsteps echoing down the hall, leaving silence like broken glass behind them. Sterling lingered a moment longer. His gaze stayed fixed on her, full of questions he hadn't earned the right to ask. Then he turned and followed. Maya sat heavily in the chair between Carlo's and Ethan's beds. Her pulse still raced, but her voice came steady. "You two shouldn't have spoken." Ethan smirked faintly. "And let them corner you alone, not a chance." Carlos shifted, wincing. "You can't outrun it, Lieutenant, not anymore. They've found you. The only choice left is whether you fight." Fight, the word pulsed in her chest like a bruise. The hospital cafeteria smelled of burnt coffee and overcooked pasta. Normal, mundane, painfully ordinary. Maya sat by the window, untouched cup in front of her, the mountains rising outside, sharp against the Montana sky. She built this life for its simplicity. Paperwork, double shifts, small talk about weather and skiing conditions. A life where no one asked questions that mattered. But that life had fractured the moment Ethan Walsh whispered her call sign. Across the cafeteria, Dr. Sterling approached with his tray. He didn't ask permission. He simply sat, unwrapping a sandwich with surgical precision. Silence stretched before he spoke. "I made some calls last night," he said quietly. "Checked your credentials again. Everything civilian checks out, but before that," he paused, "it's like you didn't exist." Maya didn't answer. "I asked a colleague who contracts with Fort Bragg. He recognized your name, Lieutenant Maya Russo, Special Operations Medical Training, Combat Medic Instructor." Sterling's gaze sharpened. "The rest of your file, classified." Still, she said nothing. Sterling leaned forward. "Who are you really?" Her hands wrapped tighter around her coffee cup, as if heat could shield her. She had rehearsed 100 lies, but here, under his stare, words stuck. Finally, "I'm someone who wants to be left alone." "That's not enough." His voice dropped, gentler now, though still edged. "You saved a man's life last night when I froze. I can't ignore that. And I can't ignore that soldiers are recognizing you by names no civilian nurse should have." Her eyes flicked to the window, the peak still dusted with snow. She kept her tone level. "Some things are better left buried." Sterling didn't press, but his silence said everything. He wasn't done asking. That night the ward grew quiet again. Patients slept under the hum of machines, their breaths heavy with morphine and exhaustion. Maya moved between beds, professional, precise, but her mind roamed far from Montana. Kandahar. The smell of dust and diesel. The ring of gunfire in the dark. The tribunal room where lawyers in pressed uniforms dissected her every word, painting her as unstable, unreliable, unfit. The officers she had reported, faces blank, unflinching, untouched by consequence. They had buried her testimony, and they had buried her career with it. But now Carlos was here. Ethan was here. Federal agents with cold eyes and classified files, and the name she had tried to erase was alive again. "Lieutenant." She paused at Ethan's bedside. He stirred, eyes cracking open. "You're still here," he murmured. "Go back to sleep," she said softly. "Not until you answer me. Are you going to testify?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know." He gave a faint, tired smile. "You already do, you just don't want to admit it yet." She adjusted his blanket, her face composed, but his words stuck. Because deep down, beneath the fear and the exhaustion, she knew he was right. The past had come back. And this time, it wasn't leaving without her. Why did her brother walk through the door? Maya hadn't seen him in almost 4 years. Not since the funeral. Not since the last time he called her a coward for leaving. Yet there he stood at the threshold of Recovery Ward C, his work clothes stained with oil and dust, his jaw tight like he was still chewing on anger. Eric Russo, her brother, the mechanic who stayed when she left. The air in the room changed. Ethan shifted against his pillows, Carlos stiffened in bed. Even Dr. Sterling, who'd been simmering at her side, blinked in surprise. But Maya froze. Eric, her voice caught, smaller than she intended. Town grapevine said my sister was being cornered by feds in her own hospital, he said flatly. His gaze cut toward the agents in their pressed suits, then back to her. Thought I should check if you were being arrested or just harassed. Lawson, the older agent, straightened his tie. Neither. This is a voluntary conversation about her potential testimony. Eric's laugh was bitter, sharp. Doesn't look voluntary. Looks like two suits leaning on a nurse who hasn't even finished her shift. The tension cracked further when Sterling stepped in, authority laced through every syllable. Enough. This is a ward, not an interrogation chamber. If you want her testimony, make an appointment and take it out of my hospital. For a long beat, Lawson said nothing. Then he handed Maya a card, crisp, official, edges sharp. 24 hours. That's all we can give you. After that, this moves forward with or without your cooperation. They left. Sterling followed, his white coat swaying like a banner. And suddenly the ward was silent except for the rhythmic beep of heart monitors. Eric's gaze softened, but only slightly. So, this is what you've been hiding from. Maya sat down heavily, her hands clasped in her lap. Part of it. War crimes, Eric said slowly, tasting the words like they were poison. That's what this is about, isn't it? Why you left the army, why you disappeared. Her throat tightened, but she nodded. I reported what I saw, they buried it, buried me with it. Eric's jaw worked. For years, resentment had lived there, hard and permanent. But tonight something else cracked through, regret maybe, or reluctant respect. Dad used to say you were the brave one, he muttered. I hated him for that. Thought he was saying fixing engines wasn't enough. Thought he meant I wasn't enough. But now, he trailed off, rubbing the back of his neck. Takes guts to stand up like you did, more guts than I ever had. It didn't feel like bravery. It felt like necessity, but she didn't say that. She only whispered, men died, I couldn't stay quiet. Carlos shifted, wincing, his voice raw. And now you can't stay quiet again. They need you, Lieutenant, we need you. Ethan's eyes found hers too, unwavering. If you don't speak, they'll bury it all over again, and the men who died will stay forgotten. The weight pressed down on her shoulders until she felt she might collapse. Her quiet life was gone. The walls she'd built had crumbled. All that was left was the truth she had once dared to tell, and the cost that came with it. I'll testify, she said finally, quiet, firm, irrevocable. One more time. The words settled heavy in the room. Ethan smiled faintly. Carlos exhaled relief. Eric crossed his arms but didn't argue. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. The next day smelled of motor oil and old coffee. Eric's garage was the same as when they were kids, cluttered, loud, concrete stained from decades of leaking engines. But today, it had visitors. A silver sedan sat outside, gleaming too clean against the rust and dirt. And inside, a man waited. Neat khakis, button-down shirt, posture still military even after retirement. Retired Colonel Patrick Henderson, Eric introduced him. A lawyer now. Military law, 30 years experience. Maya shook his hand. His grip was firm, his eyes sharp. I've reviewed the basics. You testified 3 years ago, cleared on a technicality, dismissed as unreliable. Now with Jameson's confession, they want you again. Maya's stomach tightened at the name. Lieutenant Commander Kyle Jameson, the officer she'd reported, the one who'd threatened her after she spoke. Dead now, suicide, but not before writing everything down, confirming her truth. Henderson opened his briefcase, papers stacked in careful order. They'll come for your credibility. Hard. Mental health records, combat stress, anything they can twist. PTSD, moral injury, therapy sessions. You need to give me everything. Maya hesitated. Then she forced herself to speak the words she hated most. I was diagnosed with PTSD, 6 months therapy, medication for 3 months before I stopped. Henderson nodded, writing notes with clean precision. That diagnosis helps us. Shows your distress came from witnessing crimes, not fabricating them. But the defense will weaponize it, call you unstable. We'll be ready. Eric leaned against the filing cabinet, arms folded. She's been working as a nurse for months without issue. Doesn't that prove she's solid? They don't care about truth, Henderson said bluntly. They care about doubt, reasonable doubt. The words cut, but Maya knew he was right. He leaned forward, voice lower. Jameson's confession changes everything, but it also makes the other officers desperate. They'll fight with everything they have. You'll be the target. Maya's fingers curled around the edge of her chair. I can handle it. You'll have to. Henderson gathered his papers, his expression grave. This won't just cost you peace. It'll cost you privacy, safety, anonymity. Once you step forward, there's no hiding again. No hiding. She thought of her apartment above the hardware store. The quiet mornings, the coffee she never finished, the anonymity she had craved like air. All of it would vanish. But then she thought of Kandahar, the bodies, the lies, the tribunal that called her unreliable because the truth was inconvenient. She lifted her chin. Then I'll face it. Henderson gave a small nod. Approval maybe, respect. Depositions begin within weeks. I'll file notice that I represent you. We'll prepare. When he left, silence filled the cluttered garage. Eric poured coffee, strong enough to burn, and handed her a mug. You sure about this? He asked. Maya stared at the steam curling from the cup. I'm sure. Eric studied her face. You used to look fragile when you came back, like you might shatter if someone pushed too hard. Now, he shook his head, now you look like someone ready to push back. She exhaled slowly. I spent 3 years pretending to be just a nurse, but the truth doesn't stay buried, and neither can I. That night she sat alone in her apartment, lights off, mountains looming dark beyond the window. The town was quiet, safe, unchanged, but she was. Her phone buzzed, unknown number, area code Virginia, military country. She hesitated, then answered. Hello, Lieutenant Rosso. The voice was gravel, worn by years of orders shouted over gunfire. She knew it instantly. Sam. Just Sam now, came the faint smile in his tone. Retired 6 months ago, but yes, Thompson, your old co. Her chest tightened. Sam Thompson, the only commander who'd backed her when she testified, the one who paid for it with his career. What are you doing here? She whispered. Flew in this morning. I'm at the Pine Lodge Motel. We need to talk. There are things you should know before you walk back into this. What things? He paused. It's not just testimony anymore. It's bigger, more complicated. Meet me. Mountain View Diner tomorrow, 7 o'clock. The line went dead before she could ask more. She set the phone down, her hand trembling. The past wasn't just calling. It was circling, closing in. And tomorrow night, it would sit across from her in a diner booth. Why did he pick the diner instead of her apartment? Maya asked herself the question as she slid into the red vinyl booth across from Sam Thompson. The Mountain View Diner was nearly empty at 7 a.m. Just truckers hunched over coffee, a waitress pouring refills, and the low hum of a neon sign buzzing above the window. A safe place, public enough to keep shadows at bay. Sam looked older than she remembered. His hair, once jet black under a Kevlar helmet, was streaked with gray. Deep lines cut into his face, not just age but consequence. The years had pressed weight onto his shoulders, but his eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, were the same. You came, he said, voice gravel but steady. You didn't leave me much choice, she replied, wrapping cold fingers around her mug. Sam nodded once, as if he expected the edge in her tone. You've been found, and once the agents step in, the rest follows. You needed to hear from me before they drag you back. Her jaw tightened. They already dragged me once, buried me when I told the truth. That's why we're here. He leaned forward, lowering his voice until it barely carried over the diner hum. Jameson's confession wasn't just guilt. He didn't crack on his own. Someone pushed him. Maya's pulse skipped. What do you mean? I mean, Sam said, eyes steady, the cover-up has fractures. Someone inside wanted it exposed. Jameson's suicide note didn't surface by accident. It was leaked. The words sat between them like a loaded weapon. Who? Maya asked. Sam shook his head. Haven't traced it yet. Could be someone tired of protecting officers who didn't deserve protection. Could be someone playing a deeper game. Either way, it means this isn't just about you anymore. She looked out the window, mountains etched sharp against a gray sky. It was never just about me. It was about the men who died. Sam's gaze softened just for a beat. I know, and that's why I called. Because the men who did this, they're nervous now. Nervous men make dangerous choices. If you testify, you're not just a witness. You're a target. Her stomach tightened. I already was. Not like this, he exhaled. Back then you were silenced in a courtroom. Now they'll try other methods. The waitress dropped 2 plates of eggs and hash browns between them, the smell of grease and butter filling the air. Neither touched the food. Why warn me? Maya asked finally. Because I owe you. His voice was blunt, unwavering. You stood up when everyone else stayed quiet. I didn't protect you then, cost me my career. I won't fail twice. Her throat tightened. The memory of that tribunal flashed back, the way Sam had tried to defend her, the way senior officers crushed him down, silencing his voice along with hers. He had paid for loyalty, and now he was paying again. I'm not running anymore, she said. They can come after me, I'll still speak. Sam's eyes narrowed. Then you'd better be ready, ready to lose everything you've built here, because they'll strip it piece by piece until all that's left is your word against theirs. Her word, her silence, her scars. For 3 years she had hidden, trying to live as though normalcy could erase memory. But maybe Sam was right. Maybe silence wasn't survival, it was surrender. I'll testify, she repeated, but I won't do it alone. You won't, Sam said firmly. Ethan and Carlos will back you. So will I and Henderson, he's good. But remember, the courtroom isn't the battlefield, it's worse. There the enemy wears medals and smiles. His words sat heavy, sinking like stones. The walk back from the diner was quiet. The air smelled of pine and frost, the mountains looming, the town waking slowly. Yet Maya felt eyes on her. A black sedan idled at the corner, windows tinted too dark. She didn't slow her pace, didn't let her shoulders tense, just walked. At the hospital, Sophie intercepted her, eyes bright but hesitant. Maya, are you okay? I'm fine, Maya lied. Sophie's gaze softened. I know you don't like questions, but I looked up your name. Russo, Maya Russo. There are military records, redacted ones. I saw your rank. Maya stopped, pulse spiking. You were more than a nurse, Sophie whispered. Weren't you? For a long moment, Maya said nothing. She saw the admiration in Sophie's eyes, but also the danger. Too much curiosity, too many loose threads. She could shatter the illusion Maya had built with just a few more clicks on a government server. Finally, Maya said quietly, don't look into me again, for your sake. Sophie swallowed hard, nodded, but her eyes lingered with the hunger of someone who had glimpsed a secret too big to forget. That night Maya visited Carlos. He was recovering slowly, stitches pulling at his side. The room smelled of antiseptic and iron. They'll come for you too, she said softly. Carlos smirked, though pain flickered in his eyes. They already did. That's why I ended up on that highway. Truck didn't lose control. It was nudged. Her heart dropped. An accident. An attempt, he corrected. His tone was steady, but his hands trembled faintly. I wasn't supposed to survive. Someone knows I could back your story. That makes me a liability. Her pulse thundered. If Carlos was right, it wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a hunt. You could walk away, he said. Change your name again, disappear deeper. You've done it before. Maya shook her head. If I do, they win, and the men we buried lose twice. I won't let that happen. Carlos smiled faintly, pride and sorrow mingling. That's the phantom I remember. The word hit her chest like both wound and weapon. Phantom. The ghost she had tried to kill but couldn't. The shadow she carried into every hospital shift. The name whispered in battlefield dust and again in sterile trauma bays. Later in her apartment, she sat by the window. Outside, headlights crawled across the distant highway. Every set of beams felt like surveillance. Every shadow on the street felt like danger waiting. Her phone buzzed again. A text, unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. She stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Her reflection in the glass looked like someone she didn't recognize. Half nurse, half soldier, all ghost. And she whispered to the night as if to steady herself. They wanted silence. They're going to get the opposite. Why did the headlights follow her? Maya told herself it was coincidence as she pulled out of the hospital lot that night, her old Jeep rattling against the cold Montana road. But the sedan behind her didn't pass. It kept its distance. Same speed, same turns. She tested it, making an unnecessary detour through town, past shuttered storefronts and the quiet glow of the gas station. Still there, shadowing. By the time she turned toward her apartment, her pulse was a steady drumbeat. She drove past her own street, circling the block, parking instead beneath a broken streetlight 3 buildings over. The sedan slowed, hesitated, then drifted on. But not far. From her window upstairs, she watched its brake lights glow red at the corner, waiting. She turned off her own lights and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of her refrigerator, the quiet creak of old pipes. Ordinary sounds, but her body stayed wired, every nerve remembering nights in Afghanistan when silence meant ambush. Sleep didn't come, only dawn. At the hospital, she wore exhaustion like armor. Ethan noticed first, his eyes narrowing as she checked his vitals. "You didn't sleep," he muttered. "I never do," she deflected. He grabbed her wrist, weak but insistent. "Don't lie to me, who was it?" She shook him off gently, forcing a calm mask. "Focus on healing." But Carlos, overhearing, pushed himself upright, pain flaring across his face. "They're circling you, aren't they?" She didn't answer. Ethan's voice hardened despite the strain in his throat. "Then you can't keep walking alone. That's how they break people, one shadow at a time." Her chest tightened. He wasn't wrong, but letting anyone close meant dragging them into the crosshairs too. By afternoon, the agents returned. Lawson this time without his partner. His presence drew stares in the corridor, whispers in the cafeteria. He cornered Maya near the supply room, his tone quieter than before. "You're being watched," he said simply. Her pulse jumped, though she masked it. "By you." "Not by us." Lawson's gaze didn't waver. "By people who don't want you testifying. We've had chatter, surveillance notes, vehicles outside your apartment. If you thought you were being followed, you were right." Her throat went dry. "And you waited until now to tell me." "We can't protect you if you don't cooperate." He leaned closer. "Testify formally, enter protective custody, otherwise you're on your own." Maya's hands curled into fists. "Protective custody, that's just another cage, no." Lawson studied her for a long beat. Then he slipped a small card into her pocket. Not if you need it, call this number. Don't wait too long." He left her standing in the sterile hallway, card burning against her chest like a loaded choice. That night the threat moved closer. She was walking home from a late shift, the streets quiet, when a shadow detached from the alley near her building. A man in a hooded jacket, not approaching, just standing, watching. Her pace slowed, instincts tightening. She adjusted her grip on her bag, her pulse steadying into combat rhythm. The man didn't move. But another figure appeared behind him, then a third. 3 silhouettes waiting. Her building was 30 feet away. A safe sprint, if safety even existed anymore. Then her phone buzzed, a message. "Testify, and you won't make it to the stand." She didn't look back at them. She walked past her own building, down the block, into the fluorescent light of a 24-hour laundromat. The smell of detergent and hum of machines wrapped around her like a shield. She sat in the plastic chair, heart thudding, phone clutched in her palm. And for the first time in years she felt it again. Not fear, not exactly, but the cold edge of survival instinct she had buried. They wanted her scared. Instead, they woke something else. 2 days later, she found her apartment door ajar. Not broken, picked. Inside, nothing stolen, nothing overturned, just one thing out of place, a photo frame on the kitchen counter. Her and Eric as kids, fishing poles in their hands, their father's broad smile behind them. The photo was cracked down the middle. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from fury. She drove straight to Eric's garage, storming inside, shoving the photo frame onto his desk. They were inside my home. Eric's face darkened. Then you're not going back there. I can't hide in your garage, she snapped. You won't hide, he shot back. You'll stay where I can see you, where someone's got your back. She sank into the worn office chair, exhaling hard. I don't want you in their sights. Too late, he said flatly. You're my sister. They come for you, they come through me first. Her throat tightened. He'd called her a coward once, hated her silence. But now here he was, ready to stand in the line of fire. Family, fragile, flawed, but unyielding. That night Sam called again. They're escalating, he said. I heard about the break-in, about the shadows. It means they're worried. Good, she replied coldly. Let them worry. Maya, his voice softened. Don't mistake their fear for weakness. Desperate men get reckless. You need to move carefully. She stood by Eric's window, staring at the darkened street. Careful hasn't kept me safe. Truth will. Sam exhaled on the line, weary. Then be ready, because once you speak, they'll stop trying to scare you. They'll try to silence you. The line went dead. She stayed at the window long after, the night pressing in, her reflection staring back like a ghost. Phantom. The name was no longer just memory, it was prophecy. The following evening, as she left the hospital, Ethan called out from his wheelchair. He had convinced the nurses to let him wheel into the courtyard, fresh air biting at his skin. You're walking like a soldier again, he said quietly. She paused. What does that mean? Head on a swivel, shoulders tight, eyes scanning threats. That's not a nurse walking home, that's Phantom. Her chest ached. I don't want to be her anymore. Doesn't matter what you want, she's still you, and she's the reason I'm alive. The silence stretched, heavy with truth she couldn't reject. You can run from it, Ethan said, his voice low but steady. Or you can own it, but either way they won't stop coming. Maya closed her eyes, breathing slow, steady, controlled. She knew then the storm wasn't coming, it was here. And she would have to stand in it. Why did the gun feel familiar in her hand? The answer was muscle memory. Even after years of trying to forget, her body remembered. The weight, the balance, the way her finger rested flat against the frame, never the trigger until the moment it mattered. Eric's garage smelled of oil and rust, the kind of place where danger shouldn't have been able to follow. But that night, it did. It started with the crash of glass. A rock through the window, scattering shards across the concrete floor. Then silence, too perfect, too rehearsed. Eric swore under his breath, grabbing a wrench like it was a weapon. Stay back, he hissed, protective, stubborn. But Maya had already moved. Instinct overruled hesitation. She slid to the toolbox, pulled free the pistol Eric kept for late-night troublemakers, checked the magazine, chambered the round. The sound echoed sharp in the hollow garage. Eric froze. You. Later, she cut him off. The second sound wasn't subtle, a boot crunching on glass. Then another. 2, maybe 3 men, slipping through the broken window, dark shapes against the night. Maya's voice came calm, controlled, a whisper laced with steel. Lights off. Eric killed the switch. Darkness swallowed the garage, broken only by slivers of moonlight slicing through the shattered window. The intruders paused, thrown off by the sudden black. Maya crouched low, steadying her breath, listening. Every sound mattered: the scrape of a boot, the shift of weight, the faint click of metal. One carried a weapon. Two moved like amateurs. The third too quiet, watching, waiting. Eric's whisper trembled. "What do we do?" She didn't answer with words. She moved. A shadow passed close, too close. She stepped out, fast and precise, the muzzle pressed to the man's chest before he registered motion. "Leave," she hissed. He froze. For a second she thought maybe they would. Then a voice from the back spoke, calm, measured, laced with threat. "Testify, and this is just the beginning." The man in front of her lunged. Reflex fired. She struck with the butt of the gun, bone cracking under impact. He crumpled, groaning. Another shadow charged from the left. She pivoted, low and sharp, sending him into the workbench with a crash of tools. The third didn't charge. He raised his own weapon, a black silhouette against the dim light. "Drop it," he said, cold, certain. Eric shifted behind her, wrench raised like a shield. Maya's pulse thundered, but her voice stayed flat. "You don't want to do this." "I do if it keeps your mouth shut," he sneered. The room held its breath. Then headlights swept across the broken window. Tires screeched outside. The roar of an engine. And suddenly the garage flooded with light as a truck skidded into the lot, horn blaring. The intruder cursed, backing toward the window. His fallen accomplices scrambled to their feet, limping, clutching ribs. Within seconds they vanished into the night. The truck door flew open. Carlos Mendoza leaned out, pale but furious, stitches straining against his ribs. "You good?" he shouted. Maya lowered the pistol, chest heaving with breath she forced steady. Eric dropped the wrench, his hand shaking. What the hell was that? Maya didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. Later, after the police came and left, after meaningless reports and empty reassurances about random vandalism, Maya sat in Eric's office, the pistol still heavy in her lap. Carlos leaned against the doorway, his face drawn from pain but eyes burning. "You think they'll stop? That was a warning. Next time it won't be fists. It'll be bullets." Eric paced, jaw tight. "You can't stay here, not with them circling." "I'm not running," Maya said, voice quiet but sharp. Carlos studied her, then nodded. "Good, because you can't outrun this. You never could. You have two choices now: testify and fight, or keep hiding until they finish what they started." The silence pressed in until Eric snapped. "She almost got killed tonight." "She almost got killed 3 years ago too," Carlos shot back. "And she still stood up. You don't get it, she's not just a nurse. She's the only one with the guts to speak." Eric's eyes flicked to his sister. "And what happens when guts get her buried? You think truth will protect her?" Maya's voice cut through them both, calm, steady. "Truth never protected me, but silence didn't either." They stopped. The garage hummed with the quiet weight of her words. The next morning Henderson arrived, briefcase in hand. His expression sharpened when he saw the broken glass, the taped window. "They've escalated," he said grimly. "We noticed," Eric muttered. Henderson ignored him, fixing his gaze on Maya. "This proves your testimony matters. They don't try to scare witnesses who don't have leverage." Maya crossed her arms, weary but unbroken. "Then it's time." Henderson's brows rose. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I'll testify on record, no more running." He exhaled, a mix of relief and resignation. "Then we'll accelerate prep. Depositions in D.C. within 10 days. You'll be flown under escort. We'll coordinate protection with Lawson's team." Eric bristled. "Protection? You mean hiding her again?" "No," Henderson said firmly. "Not hiding, shielding. Enough to get her to the stand alive." Alive, the word struck harder than it should. Maya set the pistol on the desk, its weight leaving her hand but not her bones. "Then let's move before they try again." That night, she drove to the hospital one last time for a shift before the transfer. The mountains loomed in twilight, roads empty, the sky bruised with the colors of a dying day. Inside, Ethan waited. His eyes caught hers the moment she stepped into the ward. "You're different," he said softly. "How?" "You stopped walking like you're pretending. You're walking like her again." Phantom, the unspoken word hung between them. Maya adjusted his blanket, her hand steady. "They wanted to scare me. All they did was remind me who I am." Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then maybe they made a mistake." She didn't answer, but as she looked down at him, alive because of her, alive because she refused silence, she knew Ethan was right. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to walk into it. Why did the courtroom feel colder than the battlefield? Maya sat at the long oak table, the U.S. flag hanging behind the panel of officers, their medals flashing under fluorescent light. The walls didn't smell of sand or smoke, but the weight was the same. Life and death, only without bullets. Words were the weapons here. Her palms rested flat against the table, steady though her pulse raced. Henderson sat beside her, papers stacked in neat order. Across the aisle, defense lawyers whispered to their clients, men in uniform, men whose names had once carried power over her life. The room quieted. The tribunal officer raised his gavel. "We'll proceed." They started with Carlos. His voice shook with pain, but he held firm, recounting Kandahar, the order to fire into a civilian compound, the chaos that followed. Ethan testified next, his voice gravelly but unbroken, confirming the cover-up, the threats, the lies. Then it was her turn. She rose, oath steady on her lips, sat in the witness chair, met the eyes of men who once called her unreliable. The prosecutor's questions were clear. Where had she been stationed? What did she see? Who gave the order? She answered each one plainly, without flourish, without fear. The truth didn't need drama. It just needed breath. But the defense came like knives. "Lieutenant Russo," the lawyer began smoothly, "you were treated for PTSD, correct?" "Yes." "You were prescribed medication. For how long?" 3 months. "And you stopped treatment early?" "Yes." "Because you felt unstable, unfit for duty." Her jaw tightened. "Because the Army dismissed me. They called me unreliable, so I stopped fighting the label." Murmurs rippled through the room. The lawyer pressed harder. "So you admit your recollection may be compromised by trauma?" "No," she said firmly. "I admit I was traumatized by what I saw. There's a difference. Trauma doesn't erase truth, it sharpens it." The lawyer smirked, but the tribunal officer's gavel silenced the whispers. Henderson leaned close, his voice low. "Perfect answer, hold that line." So she did. For every attack, every twist of words, she answered steady. She didn't beg to be believed. She didn't argue for credibility. She simply told them what happened. The dead deserved that much. Hours passed. By the time the tribunal recessed, her throat burned raw. Outside the chamber, the air smelled of rain, wet concrete, and iron. Eric was waiting, his arms folded, his face pale but proud. "You didn't break," he said softly. "I almost did," she admitted. "But you didn't, that's the part that counts." For the first time in years, his words didn't carry resentment, only respect. The days after blurred, media swarmed, headlines split between praise and suspicion. Nurse turns whistleblower. Lieutenant Russo, hero or unstable witness. Cameras hunted her outside the courthouse, voices shouting questions she never answered. Ethan and Carlos stayed close, their presence a reminder she wasn't fighting alone. Henderson managed the press. Sam ran quiet back channels to keep her informed of threats. The verdict wouldn't come for weeks, but already the cracks in the cover-up were visible. Files unsealed, officers placed on leave, names whispered in corridors that had once silenced her. And Maya. She walked through it all with steady steps, though each one cost her. Privacy gone, anonymity gone, the fragile, quiet life she had built gone. But dignity, that stayed. The last night in D.C., she slipped away from the hotel, walking alone along the Potomac. The city lights shimmered against black water, the monuments glowing like ghosts of men long gone. Her reflection stared back at her from the river, half nurse, half soldier, whole again. Phantom. The name no longer felt like a ghost chained to her. It felt like a truth she had reclaimed. Not a myth, not a rumor, just her. Footsteps approached. Ethan, moving slow on his cane, caught up to her, breath visible in the cool night air. "You disappeared once," he said quietly, "but this time don't." She looked at him, weary but alive. "I don't think I could if I tried." He smiled faintly. "Good, because some of us still need you." Her chest ached at the weight of his words. Need, not as Phantom, not as Lieutenant Russo, but as Maya. The woman who spoke when silence was easier. When she returned to Montana weeks later, the mountains hadn't changed. Snow still dusted their peaks, the town still smelled of pine and diesel, but everything in her felt different. She walked back into the hospital not as a ghost but as herself. Sophie looked up from the nurse's station, eyes wide, admiration unhidden now. "You came back," Sophie breathed. "Of course," Maya said simply. "Patients still need care." Sophie hesitated, then whispered, "You were brave." Maya smiled faintly. "No, just honest." She moved through the ward, checking vitals, adjusting drips, speaking softly to men and women who trusted her hands more than her name. And when she passed the window overlooking the mountains, she paused. The world outside was still dangerous. The men who wanted her silenced still existed. The tribunal wasn't the end, it was only a chapter. But inside she was steady, whole. Because sometimes dignity doesn't roar. It whispers. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts.